William Dawes was the man. And there was another man, there was a third man who went out warning, Dr. Prescott. Now, a lot of people don't know this. Was this the first time this was done? And why was it done? Why were they warning people of what was going on?
Just tell us.
Okay, no more questions. No more questions. I'm dealing with a bunch of, oh boy. This had been going on many times. The British knew that out in Concord, Massachusetts, there were stores of gunpowder, arms, cannons, cannonballs, and they wanted to retrieve this and get it and take it away from the Patriots. This had happened numerous times before. And Paul Revere, William Dawes, and other men had gone out saying, hey, what is that famous thing he said? Oh, I forgot, no more questions. The British are coming, right? He never said that. You know why? Because everybody there was British. Paul Revere was British. Sam Adams was British. Great signer of the Declaration in big print. John Hancock was British, so he didn't say that. He went around from house to house, knocking on doors saying, the Redcoats, under this man I mentioned before, Francis Smith, was leading this army, going out to retrieve and to take these arms that were in Concord, Massachusetts. I can't stop asking questions, but I'm going to. What city did they leave from? Boston, right? Boston. Anybody ever been to Boston? How'd you get there? Don't say car. Did you go over a bridge?
Horse and buggy.
How did you get there? What road did you take? Did you go over a bridge or did you go by land? Do you remember? Doesn't matter. If you look at a map of Boston, Boston is surrounded by water on all sides. There's a Boston Neck, it's called. And that's how you get there by land. It's the only way you can get there by land. Everywhere else is a bridge. So once you get to Boston and the British are there, they're surrounded by water except there's one land man. So to get off there, you either have to take a ferry or go by land. And there's how many? 7,000 redcoats in Boston at this point. Now, this time, Paul Revere, William Dawes, on the 4 o'clock on April 19th, they headed out at midnight the night before because of the lantern in the church, right? The Old North Church. Anybody ever been to the Old North Church?
Yep.
It's the original church. The steeple isn't original, but that has been replaced. But that's the church. And at that point, yes, there's a lot of skyscrapers around. At that point, though, that was the highest point in Boston. So anybody put anything up in that light bell tower would know, hey, 1 if by land, 2 if by the sea. That was a warning. How are they going to get where they're going? They're going to go this way, so we need to warn the people. So once Paul Revere saw that, he lit out in the middle of the night on April 19th, 18th into the 19th. Not yelling the British are coming, but warning people house to house in these little communities he came to. William Dawes went with him. Now, does anyone know what happened to Paul Revere? You hear about this, but do you hear what happened to him? What happened to him?
He got stopped.
And what happened? What is that noise? He got arrested. And he got threatened. At least 3 or 4 times by the redcoat saying, if you make a move, I'm gonna what? Blow your brains out. You know, that's something we think of today as being, vernacular in our modern age here of the term. But that was going on 250. I'll blow your brains out if you make a move. So Paul Revere, here's the actual arrest site here. When I encourage you afterwards, look at the things here. This is where he was arrested here on his way. There's a map here that shows Boston heading out, and it shows where Paul Revere was arrested. So he's warning the people. And then, okay, I'm warning these people. So what? What's going to happen if I warn them all? They're going to sit in their houses and say, hey, redcoats, wave as they go by and offer them tea and crumpets? Or what are they waiting for? What's the plan? It's till they know to get up, and these local units are called what? Militias, right? Every little community had a militia in that day. That wasn't because of anything that was going on with the war starting. It was long before there was little tunies had militias to fight against, protect themselves against the Indians, any other enemies that might come in. So they had all these militia groups. So here comes these British. Here comes the redcoats. 700 redcoats coming out of Boston, heading towards Concord, where the stores were. And they came across this little town of Lexington. And they came to what's called Lexington Green, and they met up with 77 militiamen. So what are the odds there? That's 10-to-1 odds. And they were led by John Parker. John Parker. Parker. Yes. John Parker led this, and there's a statue of him in Lexington Green now. And they put up a good fight. They slowed them up. But more importantly, it warned the people in Concord and the other villages between Lexington and Concord that the British, the Redcoats, were on their way. So they proceeded. When they got to the village of Concord, Francis Smith went up and he found a church on a hill with a cemetery, and he could see what was going on and command where to go and check, because he wanted to find where this stuff was, where this gunpowder was, where these ammunition was, where these cannons were. Now, they weren't short on anything. The British had plenty of arms and guns and everything, but they wanted to make sure that they weren't going to be attacked, and these rebels didn't have anything to attack them with. And he made an order. He said, do not molest anyone in town. Do not rough anyone up. Just find what you can, and then we will retrieve it. Well, some of the men decided, a third of the army decided to go farther up, and this is another spot, the Old North Bridge. Now that, again, is a reproduction bridge, and there's a picture of it here going across. And as they got there, they heard firing in Concord. They heard people in Concord who fighting what was going on there. And what happened was, the militia units were all gathering in a meadow up above where they could see the bridge, and that's the only way they could get across was that bridge. Anyone ever been? This is a totally different war. Antietam, Sharpsburg, Maryland, Burnside Bridge. The Union Army trying to get across to get to the Georgians who were on the other side. The only way they could get across was to go over that bridge. Same type of thing, same width. That was like a funnel. That was the only way. They couldn't go through the water. So this is the only way they can get across.
So bottleneck the troops and just create a choke point.
Yeah, it's like a funnel. Yeah.
Just fire the bridge.
Yep. So the Redcoats are going across, trying to get across, and they have rumors that this is where the stuff is. This is where the bullet, the ammunition, the cannons, the blood, gunpowder, all these things are. So it's crucial for them to get across and to retrieve these and destroy them. And as they are going across, even though they're outnumbered here, they got driven back because they're trying to charge on that bridge and they're getting shot at and fired, and they eventually turn around and they head back. Now, from Boston, Massachusetts to Lexington, it's about 16 to 18 miles. And there's no throughway, there's no side roads, there's one road to get there. So what happened in Lexington Green that morning now has ebbed into what's happening in Concord that afternoon. Now all these British soldiers have to go all the way back to Boston, not horses, they have to walk. 16 to 18 miles. And the militia units know about this. This is the only way they get back. So during this time in Lexington, or in Concord here at the bridge and beyond, all the other militia units in the area are forming and they're congregating. It was just like the wilderness. We talked about the wilderness earlier here. That's all it was. It was a dirt road with split rail fences on both sides, and it was woods.
Easy to hide, just snipe them out, pick them off.
Yeah. So these poor British, even though they outnumbered the militias, they were sitting ducks. They were on this road uncovered. They were exposed. They didn't have any protection. So as they're going, they're getting shot at and picked off. And then there's a spot. It's called Parker's Revenge Site. John Parker, remember him? He was in the battle in the Lexington Green there. And his unit, his militia, really put a whipping on the Redcoats there, and they took quite a few of them out. Out of the whole total of men killed, wounded, or taken captive, the Patriots lost 93. The British, or Redcoats, lost 300. So pretty much 3-1. Was not as big as army. And you realize that most of what Boston was at that point were British Redcoat soldiers. There were about 7,000. So 300 men missing. That's a good sized chunk. So the British headed back to Boston. They got back out there. Like I said, now there's a map here, like I showed. Boston, that's the only way they could get there. Now they're back. Now, this all spread. Now, we didn't have the internet then. I know it's hard to believe we lived without it 20 years ago or so. But back in 75, they didn't have anything. It was all done by, there was no telegraph either. How did things get passed around? Courier, right? Mail. So eventually this was all known throughout the colonies. And when people in Massachusetts and other parts, Connecticut, New Hampshire, Vermont, heard about this was going on, people had, we got to do something about this now. We got the British, the redcoats, we got them where we got them on the run here. We need to capitalize on this. Because this is something now we finally had it. And this has been brewing for many years. French and Indian War cost a lot of money. The British won that against the French, but it cost a lot of money. And they had to repay that. This is why they started doing the Stamp Act, the taxes went up, the Stamp Act, the Tea Act, everything was taxed. You weren't allowed to, you could grow tea in the colonies, but they didn't allow it. You had to buy it from Britain and pay their outrageous prices. So they finally had it after all these years of being under the British thumb. They said, this is it. We're gonna get our freedom or we're gonna die trying. Now remember, this is a year before the Declaration of Independence is signed. So a few men on their own, totally different parts of the country, had ideas. We need to do something. We need to take Boston here because that's the key right now. One of them was, Ethan Allen, and the other one was Benedict Arnold. Two different places, two different ideas. We need to go to a place like Champlain, Fort Ticonderoga, was a key place during the French and Indian War. Benedict Arnold had been there many times because Benedict Arnold was a shrewd businessman. He did a lot of trading in Canada, and he'd go up and back and up and back. He was born in Norwich, Connecticut, and he'd do a lot of traveling. And he knew Fort Ticonderoga. He knew what was there. And he had this idea, there's a lot of guns there, big guns. We can get, and we can take them, and we can use them against the British in Boston. Well, Ethan Allen. Now, what's Ethan Allen known for?
Green Mountain Boys.
Not the furniture store? Green Mountain Boys. Who's Green Mountain? What state is that? Vermont. Okay. What's New Hampshire?
Granite.
Yeah, right. But it's also known as the White Mountain State. Yeah, I know. You guys are from New Hampshire. We'll talk about John Stark here a little bit later on. But yes. Live free or die. Live free or die. John Stark. So they had this idea. Now, Benedict Arnold was born in Norwich, Connecticut. He made his home in Massachusetts. And as this started up with the Lexington, Concord, he wasn't president there, but he heard about it. He knew he was a smart guy. The Massachusetts legislature made him a colonel in the army, state army. So they gave him an authority, they gave him money, they gave him the authority to be a colonel, but the only thing they didn't give him was men. They didn't give any soldiers. So he thought, okay, well, I gotta go try and get the guns at Ticonderoga. And he met with another guy named Ethan Allen, who did have men. Him and his brother Ira had the Green Mountain Boys. And they had the same idea. Take Ticonderoga, get the guns, get it under our control, take it from the British. And they met together, and immediately there was animosity. Now, Benedict Arnold, we know about what happened in 1780 with him and post that, but this is before that, so put all that out of your mind. This is 5 years before. He was a great military tactician. Ethan Allen, after the taking of Ticonderoga, didn't do a whole lot. You're late.
Did you get to the Egyptian?
I gotta start over now. Yeah. So I'm gonna start my presentation. Anybody have any? They did not get along immediately. Benedict Arnold was a stern, proud. They both were, and they both wanted to be in charge. Well, they kind of had a gentleman's agreement. We're both going to be in co-commanders of this expedition. That never works, right? See, it must be true then. Because egos are big. I want, and we don't come to the same decision, and it was exactly that. So they went up to Ticonderoga. Ticonderoga wasn't heavily fortified at that time. You know, just like and I refer back to the Civil War because I was a Civil War historian for years. I refer back to that quite often. But there's like the prison camps in the Civil War. Who was the guards there? Who were the guards? They weren't the great elite light infantry soldiers, right? They were the who? The old, the wounded, the infirm, the guy that walks with a limp because he got shot 3 times at Chickamauga. That's the guy that takes the prison camp. Well, the Ticonderoga was the same thing. Their guards were not an elite group of soldiers. They were ones who were unfit for military as far as carrying a gun into the battle service. They carried a gun because they could defend the fort, but that was limited to that. So they decided they were going to take this fort. They had a lot of guys to do this with. They wanted to do it with a lot of men, but unfortunately, the other men never showed up. And they wanted to attack then. They wanted to get it while they could. So they ended up with 83, 84 men. And they decided to take the boats across Lake Champlain from Vermont over. And they got to the fort, and basically they could walk right into it. The door is still there. The fort is gone, most of it. It's been rebuilt as the way it was then, because if you go up there, it's not the same building, but there are certain parts that are. And they were able to get in, no problem, no fight, no shots fired. And they asked where the commandant's office was, where's his quarters? And they said, oh, it's this first door up there on the second story. And they got that reproduced there where you can actually go up the stairs, and this is where the commandant of the fort was. Now, Ethan Allen years later wrote his memoirs. And they asked him, what was said when the commander came to the door? He says, he opened the door, and he came to the door with his pants in his hand. It was the middle of the night, he's sleeping, he's got his pants, and his wife's with him, and he says, by whose authority are you doing this? And he says, and this is Ethan Allen writing, by the great Jehovah and the Second Continental Congress, which is a 75. Second Continental Congress hadn't even done anything yet. There was no such thing yet. What he really said, a lot of witnesses said, and I'm not going to repeat it. He says, basically, he didn't get asked, but if he did get asked, he totally ignored and says, come out of there, you blank, blank old rat. So they took the fort, and there was an agreement made between Arnold and Allen to don't loot, don't destroy, don't do anything, especially don't take the rum and get liquored up, which is totally opposite. Ethan Allen's men did exactly that. They broke stuff, they destroyed, they looted, they took the rum, and they got drunk for 3 or 4 days. And Benedict Arnold was mad about this. You guys you're representing us as a country, we're trying to get our freedom, and you guys are acting like a bunch of 2-year-olds. So this caused even more rift between him and Allen. And eventually who's going to be in charge now? Well, they came to an agreement. Allen was going to stay at Ticonderoga, and Benedict Arnold was going to go, and he said, this isn't the end of it. So he went a little farther, went south, down to Fort Anne. There was a battle of Fort Anne in that area, Fort Edward. In these areas here, and there wasn't much there. And he continued on to obtain these places. So, after that, they didn't take any of the cannons. They didn't take any of the guns from Ticonderoga. Not at this point. They are still there. So we have these battles coming up, right? In June of 1775. Got your timeline in your head? What happened in June 75? Battle of Archie. I'm disappointing me here. Battle of Bunker. You guys are old. Now, come on. Archie Bunker, yes. Battle of Bunker and Breed's Hill, right? You've heard of Breed's Hill? Technically, Breed's Hill is where the battle took place, but Bunker Hill is more popularly known. So it's called the Battle of Bunker, but it's really Breed. That was a big battle that the British won. And I love you tell people, well, the British won that when they tell us, and you can say, well, yeah, but we won the war. King Charles was here a couple weeks ago. Remember that? And you know what he said? Oh, he says, I can't say in the limey accent, I won't talk. He said, oh, you're celebrating your 250 years ago, your 250th anniversary. And he says, oh, in England, as we call it, just the other day. Because you look at British history, English history goes back, an unbelievable amount compared to 250 years. Mm-hmm. We're a young country. A lot's happened in those 250 years. So Bunker Hill, the British won. Well, come toward the winter time, there was a guy named Henry Knox. Now, who was Henry Knox? He was a bookseller, but he was smart. He took a lot of courses in engineering and physics and science and mathematics. And he was smart. And he knew about these guns at Ticonderoga. And he said, I have a plan to get these guns. And if we do it in the summer, it's not going to be as easy to do. So we're going to do this in the winter, in December. Right, and this is Knox's Noble Trail of Artillery. You've heard of that? Good. He went up and he took these guns and he took each tube. He didn't take the caisson or the wheels. He took the tube of the gun, the metal part, and he put them each on a sledge. And he used oxen and he used horses. And he pulled them from Ticonderoga, which you know New York State map, how far away Ticonderoga is, all the way down, all the way past Kingston, all the way down Terrytown, Sleepy Hollow area, right on the Hudson. And then he took them across and ended up in Boston, Massachusetts with these guns. Whereas you see the city of Boston is on it's a little, not an island, but almost. And then they put the guns all around. So now we got an eye on you guys. The main hub of the British Army was here. Now, they didn't get there. It took them, they left December. It took them about 4 or 5 weeks to get there. That's a lot of work. They lost 2 or 3 in the Hudson River, in the Mohawk River. They retrieved 2 or 3 out of the river. The people in Albany, New York, helped them retrieve one that had fallen off and into the Hudson River. So when they got to Boston, they called it the Albany. They actually named the cannon because the people of Albany were so helpful in getting them this gun, this barrel tube cannon, very important. So they got that to Boston, and then after that, 76 comes. Then the Declaration of Independence in July. And I could keep going on what events, but what I wanted to talk about here was this guy here in purple writing, Benedict Arnold. Right? You know him from what? What's the big, no question about
Traitor.
it, right?
The eggs.
Huh?
Spy,
Eggs.
traitor.
What'd you say, Adam?
The eggs.
Yeah, oh. Always one. This is why I bring this. Adam, I need a volunteer. Eggs.
Hey, I'm already going bald. You just
I'll finish it all. Hey, look at it. See what this did to me? I tell ya.
That's some results.
Got
right
experience. Helping not all it's cut out to be. Benedict Arnold, known as a traitor, but after this, he was commissioned as a general, but he wanted to be a major general, not just a brigadier general. He wanted to be, and he was, until 1780, he was the best general that the Continental Army had. Because what great battle did he win?
West Point.
West Point? No, what battle?
Saratoga.
Saratoga.
Yeah, good man. He did sell out West Point, that's what it was.
Yeah.
He gave the point. Saratoga. Battles of Saratoga. You know, there were 2 battles. One was in September and one was in October of 77. Does anyone know about those battles? My goodness gracious, that's good.
You know the Battle of Brooklyn?
Battle of Brooklyn Heights?
No, Brooklyn.
Brooklyn.
Yeah.
Yeah, that Brooklyn Heights is what it was called then, right? New York City, right?
That they lost.
Yeah, Brooklyn Heights. Yeah. Brooklyn's not like it is now. It was a different type of jungle.
It's not a jungle now.
There was a lot. No?
Concrete jungle.
There were a lot of battles fought in Long Island and New York City. That was a key area. And during the entire revolution, that New York City was under British control. And that is a key because what empties into New York City? What river? Hudson River. No more questions. I'm going to talk. Hudson River. If you go up the Hudson River, Henry Hudson went up the Hudson River. That's why they call it the Hudson River, right? He went up. And as he's going, he's seeing all these fields, huge cornfields with these huge houses filled with corn. Now, who were they? Those were the Haudenosaunee, the Native Americans, the Indians that lived along that river. And he was impressed at that. Wow, that farmland's amazing. But the key is, if you go up the Hudson River and you get to Albany, a little north of Albany, Cohoes, is where the Mohawk River dumps in. The Mohawk River starts out near Rome, New York, Oneida Lake, and it dumps into the Hudson River. These waterways were the throughways of the 18th century. That's how they traveled. So you could go up the Hudson River, cross over on the Mohawk. This is how they traded. They go up the Mohawk all the way out to the Rome, Utica area, and they trade once they got there. But they trade all along the way. So to get there, they could go to Rome. Anybody been to Fort Stanwix?
Mm-hmm.
Fort Stanwix in Rome, New York? There was a place there, it's called the Oneida Carrying Place. And what that means is they had to take the boats or the canoes or the flat bottom bateaus and they'd have to carry them. Right. Yes, portage them across and get to Wood Creek, which would then take them to Oswego Lake. Oswego Lake would take the Oswego River into Big Lake, Ontario. And then from there, they go to Lake Erie and then out west, all by water. That's why the Hudson and the Mohawk Rivers were so key during this time period to travel, for trade. You control that. you control whatever happens west of that, which is pretty much everything west of New York State. You got Vermont, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Maine, Rhode Island, Connecticut. Those states are east. But west of that, the Hudson River was key. That's why it was so key for the British to have New York City. So the battles of Saratoga, the plan was for John Burgoyne to come down from Canada. He had another major general named Barry St. Ledger, who was coming down Oswego Lake, and he was going to come down to Rome, and he was going to cross over and go east. And they were going to meet in Albany, here where the Mohawk dumps into the Hudson River. And they were going to decide now, what were we going to do? Because down in New York City was William Howe, who was a big British general. Sadly for the British, they started going across and they met up with General Nicholas Herkimer at the Battle of Oriskany. You've heard of that, right? Yeah. Barry St. Ledger and his Mohawk and his Seneca Indians said, never mind, this is not worth it. Forget it. He went back to Canada. Now John Burgoyne's coming down, going to Albany. Same idea. He met an army in Schuylerville, New York, Saratoga, met up with the Continental Army there. Fought one battle on September 19th, basically won that battle. It ended at night. British pulled back a little bit and stayed there for 3 weeks without attacking, without doing anything except going out. Well, John Burgoyne had a lot of men, and all these men had their families with them, their women, their wives, children. They had all the volunteers, the camp followers who did laundry, the doctors, all these people. Well, you've been there 3 weeks. What do you think that happened? Getting a little hungry. So they decided to send out some reconnoiters to go out and see. They knew where the Americans were, the Continentals were pretty much an idea where they were, and they sent men out to go and forage to see about getting food. And they found a couple of good-sized wheat fields. So they said, all right, guys, he came out, and now you guys aren't soldiers anymore. You guys are going to be farmers here. So they sat down, they started cutting the wheat. Patriots under Benedict Arnold, who was second in command under Horatio Gates, knew what was going on. He knew something was going on over there. He wasn't sure what. They came forward, but then they stopped for a time. It's like, what? So they went up and looked to see what was going on, and they saw that they were doing this. And he asked, what do you think he asked? Hey, let's attack. So finally the Patriot Army did attack, and the British Army attacked. So we had this big battle of Freeman's Farm. And then the second battle was the Battle of Bemis's Heights, which is where the Patriots had their headquarters. Nielsen House is still there today. This was there at the time. Has anyone ever gone here? Saratoga Battlefield. If you go there, there's a monument by the house. It's a concrete monument, and it says, Battles of Saratoga, gives all the stuff, and it says, Headquarters of Enoch Poor, and then a couple other names. Anyone ever heard of Enoch Poor?
No.
That was Benedict Arnold's headquarters. But because when they put this monument up in the late 1800s,
You didn't want to use his name.
they did not want to use his name. Now, I meant to bring a board and I forgot, but there is a picture of it here. I will point to it with my trusty hatchet. It's called the Boot Monument. You've heard of the Boot Monument? At Saratoga, it's a boot, an actual boot, and it talks about the greatest general that the Continental Army has ever known. He gives a whole list of what he did. Never mentions his name. It's describing Benedict Arnold. Then if you go to Schuylerville at the Victory Woods, it's called, there's a huge obelisk. And it's got a statue of Horatio Gates. You walk around, it's got a statue of Peter Schuylerville, who was a commander of the Continental Army before, New York Army before Gates. You go around and you'll see a man named Daniel Morgan. Then you go down to the final side and you look and it's empty. Why is it empty? Who's supposed to be there? You guessed it, Benedict Arnold. Same time period, 1880s, 1890s, when they built these, there was a lot of animosity about, yes, he was a great general, he did win these battles, but to honor him on the side of Horatio Gates, General Washington, Nathaniel Greene, these other great leaders of the Continental Army, they didn't think it was anything they wanted to do at that time period. Now with 100 and some years, there are a lot of, now the monument markers that are put up talk about Benedict Arnold did this. He was a great American hero at this point. But it's funny because you go there and you look, it's empty. Who's supposed to be there? It conjures up, you want to know who it is, so immediately it's You're given his name. You're told who it's supposed to be. The boot minder. Who's this guy? Who's this thing describing? Benedict Arnold. Yeah. Well, Benedict Arnold was right at the boot monument, though. But they put a hat or a cannon or something.
He lost his leg.
Well, yeah, he didn't lose it, but he got shot in it again.
Twice.
Second time. He got shot in Quebec City in '75. That's a whole different story in itself. You want to study about trying to take Quebec City in the winter time, Benedict Arnold.
Yeah, he went with the bateaux.
And the way he went up through Maine and across.
Yeah,
That's
all the way through Maine.
amazing. Anybody survived to even make it to there. And Fort Quebec is on a hill. It's a fortress city up.
Yes.
And he got shot there. Well, as he's writing, and there's a lot of things with the Battle of the Saratoga. Any history book, I'll say any, but 99% of them you read, you'll say Horatio Gates and Benedict Arnold hate each other. Gates didn't want Benedict Arnold to go out and do anything. He basically told him, go sit in your tent and knock it off, stop crying. I'm in charge here, not you. If you bug me again, I'm going to take my sword and I'm going to whack you. So there's these rumors that, Benedict Arnold was drunk. Benedict Arnold heard, this is the second battle in October. Benedict Arnold heard his men retreating, and he came out of his tent and said, what's going on? Well, no, and he got on, he stole a horse, got on a horse, took off toward the enemy, and his men were like, hey, Arnold, let's make eggs Benedict. And they raced with him, and they went in behind the redoubt, and they beat the Germans, they beat the Hessians, they beat the British, and they won the battle. But it's not what happened. And you find it in most history books. Because of a man, if you've gone to there, you'll see a trail. It's called the Wilkinson Trail. And I'm surprised they haven't changed the name of this. John Wilkinson wrote his memoirs in the 1830s. And basically he scribbled out anything Benedict Arnold did and put his name in place. Now Benedict Arnold died, let's see, Benedict Arnold died in 1795. Before this happened, so he couldn't refute any of this. So he took credit for everything Arnold did. Well, people knew about this and they knew it was wrong. But this is where a lot of the myth began of what Arnold did at the Battle of Saratoga, especially because he was there. But years later, actually 20 years ago, they found a letter. And it was written by one of the soldiers. I think he was from New Hampshire or Connecticut. They had a lot of soldiers there. Funny thing is, Battle of Saratoga didn't have any New York soldiers. There were no militia, no soldiers from New York. They're mostly from Connecticut, Massachusetts, New Hampshire. And this letter's written, the battle was on October 19th. This is written a couple days later, and it says, my dear wife, I'm going to regard to you the things that I have seen and heard. And he says, talks about reporting to General Gage, because when the unit came into a camp, they say, okay, where's the commander? Okay, we'll go with him. Where do you want us? And as he's going to him, he hears, the aides outside the tent, and he hears Gage is talking to Arnold. Now, Horatio Gates, the commander of this whole army, Benedict Arnold's second in command. And he's not eavesdropping, he's standing there. He can't help but hear. He's not going like this to the door, but he can hear. Arnold says to him, give me some men and we will see what kind of fun we can have with them today. And Gage says, basically, do it. Go ahead. That's when he takes his men and he charges toward this redoubt, Raymond's redoubt, and defeats the British and wins the battle and gets shot in the knee on a horse. Falls on him. It always happens. Whenever anybody gets shot in the knee or the leg, a horse always falls on him. So he gets shot, the horse gets shot, the horse falls on him, he's on the ground. Well, his men loved him. And they get ready, they see the guy that shot him, and they're getting ready to shoot the guy. And Arnold says, stop, hold it, don't kill his man, he's a brave man, he's just doing his duty. He prevented his men. I mean, that's not, I guess it's part of war, but also it's, this guy's fighting us just like you fighting him. So let him go. Take him prisoner. His knee is horrible for us. Actually, it was his ankle. They said it was his knee, but actually it was his ankle. He was put in the hospital in Albany, was there for months. Remember, this is October. By January, February, he's still in the hospital, convalescing. Never got a field commission again. Washington promoted him to Philadelphia to be the governor of Philadelphia city. Keep track of that. And he hated it. He was like, anybody work outside, a farmer, you don't want to sit at a desk all day. Arnold was a man. Oh, do you sit at a desk?
No, I'm outside.
No, okay. Or vice versa. If you're a desk person, there's nothing wrong with either one. But I'm an outdoors. I like to work outside. If I have to sit at a desk all day, it would drive me nuts. And he didn't want to sit at a desk all day, be in a pencil. He wanted to be out there leading, commanding, doing what God-given talents he had of leading his army, knowing the strategy, how to defeat an enemy, even if it was a larger enemy, and he hated it. And this, I'm not going to go a whole lot farther, but this is what started to turn him going to the British. He'd write correspondence letters to Washington and even Benjamin Franklin. And he was always our country is in need of good leaders. Our country, I hope we're doing it for the benefit of our country. I know it's turned into a Benedict Arnold story, but this is all key to the battles of Saratoga, Ticonderoga, and all the big part of American history. And later on in like 79 or 80, his wording started to change a little as he's writing his letters. It wasn't our country anymore. It was when he wrote to George Washington. Now, George Washington loved him. I'm going to cut myself off here and I'll go back. But in Tappan, New York, it's called the 76 Tavern. And it was built in 76. I love it. The guy told me, he says, the main part of it's the old part. The new part, 1780. So that's new. That figures into the story because Arnold and John Andre had met there many times. John Andre was the one who we talked with about giving the plans to West Point. John Andre was a 22-year-old French guy, French-named Englishman who was actually hung in Tappan for treason. Benedict Arnold was not hung, he went to England. But there was a picture of Benedict Arnold. And by the way, if you look up Benedict Arnold online, photos, images, don't believe about 90% of what he looked like. There's only about 3 that are really accurate, and this is the most accurate right here. This one here, that's what he looked like, because that was an artist rendition of him. It wasn't in color, it wasn't photographed, it was done by art, but there was a picture of him on the mantle in the 76 Tavern, and when George Washington visited there, he turned the picture over, and they say, I mean, it's been cleaned and stuff, but they say to this day that picture is still upside down, because he was like a son to George Washington. They had a good relationship. But when he started writing letters toward the end before he'd write, your country is in need of great leaders. I hope your leaders are thinking of the best interest of your country. It started becoming your country, your leaders, instead of our. So you can see a little hint of what he was thinking. Did he go because he wanted the money? Or that was a good part of it. But a bigger part was he was given a command on the field again. He was a British leader. You don't think of much of that. He turned traitor. So what did he do? He sold out West Point, and that was the end of it. He actually burned the city of Richmond, Virginia, because Thomas Jefferson wanted to use it. This is long before the Civil War. He burned Richmond, Virginia, before it was burned in the Civil War. Benedict Arnold did that. So history is neat, but you have to, when you study, you need to look at primary sources, letters, first-hand accounts, and compare them with other first-hand accounts of the same event. And because a lot of history is, like I said, with Wilkinson, he wrote these memoirs years later, and who's going to dispute it? The guy's dead you're talking about. He took all of his credit, and even men wrote, and years ago, it was before the Civil War, like 1850, somebody wrote they wanted to do a study on Saratoga. And he inquired with some of the other men, and they said, do not trust Wilkinson. Don't trust anything he tells you. The chief historian and guide at the Saratoga battlefield, Eric Schnitzer, is a friend of mine, said, don't believe anything he tells you. You can look outside today and tell me those are cherry blossoms. Don't believe him, even if they are, because 99.9% of the time he's lying. Anything he's written down, don't trust any of it. So if people that are interested in history, look at the primary sources, look at the letters if you can, and they're becoming more and more available because people are finding them, they're coming out. People are finding them in their attics and places that are crazy, and they're getting more and more history. So the farther we go, you think, the less we know, but actually it's the other way around. The farther we get from this Revolutionary War, we're learning more and more different things. Because of technology is a great thing, because you can communicate with someone in Massachusetts like that. Hey, I have the genealogy. Who was it was telling me? The pension record, right? Is that you?
Me.
You, pension records for a Revolutionary War veteran, right? Yes. That happened then? I thought that didn't start till the Civil War. People, I didn't realize the pension records of the Revolution. Yeah, it took them a long time to get it. It wasn't in 1785, 2 years after the war ended. It was in the 1800s, 1830s. It was a long time after that the family started getting any kind of, most times the veteran was gone. And before the family even received any kind of pension. See, that's something too. The war didn't end till 1783. Right? 76 is the big year. How many years? That's 7 years later. That war. Not a lot happened in 83, however, but it was still considered the war. Now around here, 76, 77 Saratoga. Then you get into 1778. Now you're getting more local here. 78, 79, 80, and 81. This is where the Mohawk Valley, the Schoharie Valley, the Unadilla Valley, all these things take place in New York State because it became a key state because of the Six Nations getting involved. Who are the Six Nations?
Iroquois.
No, don't call them that.
Haudenosaunee.
Haudenosaunee. Not me, Iroquois is a derogatory name that was given to them by the French, which means sneaky ones, snake-like, trickery, they can't be trusted. Haudenosaunee means
People in the extended house.
people of the extended or people of the longhouse, correct. Not only of the house they live in, but in proximity to New York State, it's a long house. From the east, it's the Mohawk, to the west, the Seneca. And these nations were right in the middle of this battle, right in the middle of this, everything that was going on here. So both sides wanted them, join our side. And they didn't want it, the Haudenosaunee wanted to stay neutral. I don't want to, they said, we don't want to get in a brother battle. You guys are brothers. We don't want to be involved in your brother. And then it happened up in the Mohawk Valley, when it started infringing on our homes and our families and our crops and our livelihood, then they had to get involved. It was by force, not by choice. Out of the Six Nations, 4 of them sided with the British. Mohawk and the Seneca, Onondaga and Cayuga were the big ones. Mohawk and Seneca especially. Joseph Brant, everybody's heard of Joseph Brant, right?
Mhm.
Joseph Brant, Ticonderoga, Mohawk, never a Mohawk chief. You see that a lot of times. He was never a chief. He wasn't a sachem. He was a Mohawk captain for the British. He led raids all over New York State. You go down 97 here, down to Port Jervis and past, burned here, burned there, Fort Delaware. I talked to this lady here. There's brochures here about Fort Delaware. Take these if you want. If anybody's never been there, you'll like it. But Joseph Brant burned everything. But then again, so did the Patriots. They burned Sydney. Old Unadilla, that was Sydney. They burned Onondaga, which is Windsor. They burned Conahunta, which is out near Afton. These are all these British, or these Indian Haudenosaunee villages that the British burned. And then there's retaliation. What retaliation? See, this became New York State, became a hot topic of fire because we burned everything and they burned everything. The Wyoming Valley Massacre down in Pennsylvania. Big one up north was the Cherry Valley Massacre, right? You've heard of the Cherry Valley Massacre? Anybody ever been up that way?
Mhm.
You go to all the little sites where that was something else. That was in the November of 1778. Right? 1778. I mean, now, finally, General Washington, Continental Army has had it. He realizes the Haudenosaunee are, remember I talked about Henry Hudson coming up and seeing all these fields of food. They were feeding the British Army at Fort Oswego. And that's where they get a lot of the food from in this. So they decided, Washington said, we gotta do something about this. Then you have the Sullivan-Clinton expedition, right? You've heard of that?
Yep.
Good, man, good. Where they burned everything, cities, towns, villages, crops, especially up in the, especially the Finger Lakes region where there were crops of peaches, apples, houses. So that's what they got for siding with the British and helping them out. But it was a back and forth in New York State here. The British would do something, the Continental Army, the Patriots would retaliate with this, and it was raids on this town and raids on here. And I talked earlier about the Sugar Bush raid out in Harpersfield. Joseph Brant came from Schoharie, he was out in Cobleskill and Middleburg in that area. Heard that there was maple syrup in Harpersfield, Stamford area. Came out and raided the bushes, raided where they were making it. John Harper, who Harpersfield's named after, was killed. Just for a nice little sweet snack. But it was in April. And when they went in April, the snow was 3 feet deep. And they took the prisoners and they marched them back to Fort Oswego, which is about 300 miles away. Imagine walking 300 miles in the snow in the winter, and the prisoners did not, yeah. So anyway, there's the Revolutionary War in a nutshell. Not really. That's the big parts, little things I enjoy. And now, your turn. Any questions?
Never sink. Isn't there a battle of never sink?
No, never sink. It's passed down past, yeah, Port Jervis.
Right.
Yeah.
Menacing.
Mini sink.
Mini-sink.
It's never sink, mini sink. That whole area was called that. Mini sink
I'm
was
sorry,
Port
yeah.
Jervis. Well, no, you're right. It is never sink. Mini sink. Have you ever been to the mini sink battlefield?
I've been by it,
You've been by Narrowsburg.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, Berryville
Very
Mhm.
on 97 is right there. Do you know where the Roebling Bridge is?
Yeah,
Jane Gray Museum.
right.
Yeah, yeah.
Been there?
Yep.
But you never been to the battlefield? It's right across the street.
Ran
Believe it or
all
not.
the time.
It's right across. It is. If you know where it is, though, it's right there. Though. It's right across the road. Literally, you go up off the bridge and turn right, and then take a quick left, and then it's up on the left.
No kidding.
It's a beautiful battlefield. It's quiet. It's small. You can walk the whole thing in 20 minutes or half an hour. There's Sentinel Rock, there's Hospital Rock, and then there's Indian Rock. The three main points of this, and that wasn't a huge battle. But the men from Goshen were coming this way, and this is July of '79. So this is right a month before the Sullivan Clinton expedition. Joseph Brant was part of this. And they accidentally fired a gun. The Continental Army fired a gun, and Brant was downstream, and he knew where they were then. Okay. And they came up, and it was an ambush. There wasn't many men. General Tustin was killed, which if you go down 97, the town of Tustin, that's named after him. Yep. He was killed. There's Hospital Rock. It's a shelf, limestone shelves, and you can actually get underneath it now. 250 years ago, this was way out, but they sheltered in there. It was a hot July day, but it was cool in there, and the people that were wounded, the Continental soldiers in Tustin were there, and they rushed upon them. And then they proceeded to go down to 97, which wasn't there, but it was a trail right by the Delaware. They crossed back over to Delaware, and then Joseph Brant headed back up to Newtown. You know where that is? Yeah, modern day Elmira. Battle of Newtown was the biggest battle of the Sullivan Clinton.
I was gonna ask, was that, because that's on the highway, I was gonna ask, was that part of the,
When you drive on 17, that is the battlefield.
Yeah.
The park is up on the hill. There was some of the battle where they were heading back up to go north to Horseheads.
yeah,
But the main battle was fought right along the Chemung River in that area where you drive. In Loman,
yeah.
if you go the back road there.
There's
I think
still,
it's
there's
67.
a Union Jack still flying
Yeah,
there.
there's markers all along that road. They camped here, they were attacked here, they had breastworks here. Joseph Brant actually had his headquarters, he was only there a few days, but on the island out in the Chemung River there. So,
Were the Lenapes involved in all, at all?
no,
They were just
the Delaware and the Lenni Lenape,
New York City.
they're more Pennsylvania, yeah, eastern Pennsylvania, no. Not in this area anyways. I'm not gonna say they weren't involved, I'm just not up here.
No, they're south.
Yeah. They may have been, but I don't think so. I think the Mohicans were involved in the not the battle, it was a massacre, but Battle of Wyoming Valley Massacre down near Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. So anybody have been there? You've seen the Bloody Rock? Okay, there's a rock there, and it's covered with metal, and it's got holes that you can see, because years people chip away. What happened here was, you know the story then. Catherine Montour and Esther Montour were two Indian chiefs. They were actually French, but I could go into a long story that the Native American nations could adopt you in, even as a French person or an Englishman or a Palatine German. You could become a full member of that nation. You weren't blooded nation, but you could be a member. Well, these two women were sisters, and they were French, but they were adopted in. And the one lived up near Catherine Montour, which is up near Watkins Glen. The other lived down here in Queen Esther. And what they said after the massacre, battle, whatever you want to call it there, where the British and Indians fought the Patriots, she had 12 guys that were all captive, and she later put their heads down on the rock, and then you can figure out what happened next. So, and it's called a Bloody Rock because of that. Now, there's like I say, with history, you got to take both sides. Some people say, yeah, that happened. Some people said, no, it didn't happen. Some people said someone else did it. No, it was her. But that's Queen Esther's Bloody Rock now, because her son was killed by the Patriot soldiers, and this was in retaliation for that. So then you had that, and coupled with the Cherry Valley Massacre, which took place later in '78, and then proceed. It wasn't just one battle took place because we want to fight. It was something, during the whole war, there was something that preceded it. What caused this to happen? Why was the Battle of Newtown? Because, General Clinton Canoe Regatta over here in Bainbridge. General Clinton came from Canajoharie down to Cooperstown, blocked up Seagull Lake in Cooperstown, where the mouth of the Susquehanna River is. He dammed that up. Anyone been up there? I know you have.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Council Rock Park there. Now, you know where the next lake over is? That Ticonderoga Lake, Richfield Springs. They said when he dammed that lake up, it was dammed up for a month, and the water's constantly flowing in. They said that water merged the two lakes together. That's like 12 miles away. That's a lot of water. Well, that took a long time, you know, they dammed it up. And the reason they dammed it up is they built bateaus during this time. Bateaus are flat bottom boats, river boats. Built all these bateaus, getting ready to go down, and when they got the signal to do it, they blew up the dam with cannon, and the water just, it was a huge tidal wave. I don't know how they didn't get drowned doing this. I go there and I envision, how did they do this with these boats? How did they stay in their boats? A huge tidal wave going down the Susquehanna River, all the way down, you know, from Cooperstown to Milford and that whole area down. And that's what started that leg of it. Well, John Sullivan was down in Pennsylvania, and he came up to Athens, Pennsylvania, which his fort was called Fort Athens, which is still there. Well, the marker's there where he had his fort, and then from there he went up, met Sullivan and Clinton met in Newtown. Actually, they met in Chemung, the town of Chemung. They burned that, and then they met resistance in Newtown, Elmira, a little bit this side of Newtown, or Elmira. That's where the hill, and from there they proceeded to go up north to Montour Falls, Watkins Glen, up to Seneca Falls, or not Seneca Falls, up to Lake Seneca, burning villages all the way up to where they got to Geneva, which was a huge storehouse, British storehouse. Yeah, that was the biggest storehouse. The Seneca Indian Nation was the largest population-wise of all the 6 nations. So they got there, and that was Walter Butler had his store there too. So they burned all that. Then they headed west, and they went to a place called Canandaigua. Yeah, and then they went to a place afterwards called Honeoye Lake, Honeoye Falls, the Torture Tree, which is basically
Along the river.
what ended this. These poor guys were sent out the Boyd Parker expedition. We're told to do something, and this is why I say when you're a leader together, it doesn't work. Because your supposed co-leader tells you to do something, you're like, I know more, go buzz off, I'm gonna do what I want. He took his men, and you call it a torture tree for a reason, and him and his men were, yeah. So look up that if you wanna look up torture tree near Canandaigua, New York. Yeah, I'm not going into any details, but that, and then they came back and went down, they split up and all the way down the Finger Lakes, because they realized all the food was gone, the people were gone, ain't nobody gonna give them any resistance now, and they killed and burned anything else they could find, any animals or anything. And they got down to where modern day Horseheads is. You ever wonder why Horseheads is called that?
I read a thing one time, I don't know if it's true.
After all this walking, these poor pack horses were worn out. They killed them there, they used the meat, what little there was, and they left them. Seneca came back. See, this whole thing was kind of meant to be a get rid of the Indians, you know, almost a genocidal type thing, but they're still here today. But they came back to the Seneca area, the Indians came back and their land was there, and like, what in the world? So for some reason they piled up all the horse heads along the road for years. Like this is 1779, 1780, 81, 82, after the Revolutionary War, early 1800s, white man started settling in, because after the war, the soldiers were given land grants. This is how they got their, property. You get a farm, a homestead, you farm it. It's yours. You're not an indentured servant, or you're not paying rent, this is yours. So they started going out there, and they're like, why in the world they see a line? I mean, hundreds of horse heads. And so it's today called Horseheads because of that. So yes, that is the name derivative of the Sullivan Clinton expedition. So, yeah, war's a horrible, terrible, terrible thing. So for our independence here, both sides lost a lot of men, a lot of things, a lot of atrocities went on both sides, because you're dealing with humans, both sides. Nobody was good guys or bad guys, however you want to look at it. You live in 1775. Are you going to be a loyalist or are you going to be a patriot? Looking back 250 years, oh man, that King George, the pain in the neck. I don't want to be under his rule. Wait a minute, he's providing this, that, and that. I don't know, maybe I would be a loyalist or a royalist and want to stay. I can't, looking back, we might have a different idea if we're living during that time period. So, there, I've gone an hour, I'm done. No more questions. No, I'm teasing you.
I had read that part of the, you're talking cause and effect. Part of the reason for the Sullivan Clinton campaign was because Washington couldn't keep people on the field because the Indians kept attacking their farms and homesteads.
So they had to go home all the time.
So they had to go home all the time. So he decided
Right.
once and for all to end that, and
Right.
that's why they
Right.
swept the Susquehanna and then back
Right.
up into New York.
Because in New York here,
Is
there
that
were
accurate?
Yeah, there were Continental Army, but a lot of them were militia units. They were signed up for 30 days, 90 days, and Sorry, yeah, my wife lives in Schoharie County. I'm gonna, the Schoharie Valley was called the breadbasket of the Revolution. There was so much food there to provide wheat, and corn, and crops. Yeah. So yeah, we gotta stop this. What finally put the nail on the head was the Wyoming and the Cherry Valley massacres together that same year, and he realized there was a lot of, and I'll say this, like the Boston Tea Party, Indians involved, because remember the Boston Tea Party were a bunch of rebels who were dressed as Indians. Same thing at Cherry Valley. There were a bunch of Walter Butler's men. If you don't know anything about Walter Butler, look up him and his father, John Butler. Walter Butler was his son. There's a William Butler who's on the Patriot side, he's the one that burned Sydney. But they lived up near Fonda, New York. And his men, Butler's Rangers, they wore green coats. Well, when they raided, they wore, and I dress like this. I do a presentation on the Cherry Valley Massacre. I take this off, I wear this because this represents a lot of different things. Could be, this is normal clothes for a militia guy, just a normal farmer or whatever. He had his knife, he had his gorget. Somebody told me I got it backwards. The gorget, anyone know what a gorget is? I'll tell you in a second, but anyway, get to you. I dress up like a Seneca, but not a real Seneca, a Walter Butler warrior Seneca, because they painted their faces red, and they scared them. They had the feathers. They put black around their eyes. They had their hatchet, and they had lots of guns. And to see, any Indian, the Battle of Little Bighorn, to see the Lakota Sioux coming at you dressed in that war paint is scarier than the gun they're handling. So they dressed like this, Walter Butler's Rangers in Cherry Valley, to scare, but there were hardly any really Indians that were there. Joseph Brant was there, but only under duress. He did not want to be there. He was heading back to Fort Oswego, and Walter Butler said, come on, you come with me. And he's like, uh-uh. And he's like, my father said, you don't come with me, you don't get paid. So, well, okay, I'll go. He went a different way, Joseph Brant. He got into town and he started warning people that he knew that weren't loyalists. They were part of the Patriots. He warned them. He said, put a mark on you. Tell them you're sick. So when the Seneca, fake Senecas, Walter Butler's Rangers got in there, they see someone. There was a code that they wouldn't hurt that person. So he saved a lot of lives in Cherry Valley. But they dressed like that. So there weren't a lot of Indians there. There were some. But the Indians got a lot of bad name, getting blamed for a lot of things that they did not do. And Washington finally had it. He's like, yes, you guys are leaving. I need you out fighting. And I know that these guys, all these nations are fighting and they're providing food for the British Army. And this is what's keeping you going. So you cut off remember, Army marches on his stomach. Let's cut that off. They won't be so willing to fight to cut off their food. Gorget is a thing that came from the medieval times. Remember the suits of armor they'd wear? They had they're like 5 different pieces for a shoulder. Well, this basically is one piece. By the 1700s, the armor was gone, but they kept this as a sign of rank. So you see even, not in any of the pictures I have, but you see a lot of pictures during that time period. No matter if you're French, English, American, whatever, it would be a gorget. It's a French term. So it means it's kind of like a symbol of rank. Also, while we're talking about rank, you'll see in modern day armies, even the Civil War, you'd see on their sleeves, they'd have numbers, like colors that would denote their rank, The beginning of the Revolutionary War, you see that Benedict Arnold had a purple sash going across here. That was denoting his rank. He was a brigadier general. Now, George Washington had a blue sash. He was the commanding general. So whatever color sash you had on denoted your rank. By the end of the war, they had epaulets that denoted the rank. They're told by looking at someone what rank they were. So yes, it kind of is on backwards, but it's supposed to be gold, not the black on the back. Correct. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yep. Yep. This wouldn't do a whole lot, but it came from that, and they wanted to keep part of that medieval, that armor, that knights type thing, and so they kept that on the neat fashion piece. So, any other questions?
13 stars on the flag with Roman numeral 3.
Roman numeral 3 in the middle?
No, yeah, 111. You know what that is?
No.
That is 3% of the population that fought against the British.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that is all we fought. Our people fought against.
There's a flag like that?
Yeah.
Oh, no. I didn't know
There's
that.
stickers out all over everywhere, yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
3%, huh?
3% of the population fought against the British.
Was that because they were for them, or just didn't want to fight, or
Just didn't want to get involved, and yeah. But considering what would happen, how quick it would have been over with if we'd had
even at 10%.
30-40%.
Right, right.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's.
Yeah. One more thing, I talked about New Hampshire, John Stark, real quick. John Stark, he said, live free or die. Yeah, that's on the license plate, you see it there, John, you know, live
Mhm.
free or die, New York, New Hampshire. The little man on the rock, the old man on the rock's gone.
Yeah,
They got-
it fell down.
Yeah, it got the storm, but that saying came from the Battle of Bennington. After, actually. And there's a famous saying he said before, he's like, he says, John Stark and his men will win tonight, or Molly Stark sleeps a widow tonight. That was the day of the battle, and they won. Years later, they had a reunion in Bennington, and they invited him to come, and he was old at the time of the battle here, he was in his 50s in 77. So by 1820, he was quite old, he was in his 90s, and they invited him to the reunion. And he gave this, and downtown Bennington has this whole thing, a big board that talks about it, and the very last line has, death is not the greatest of all evils. What was it? Live free or die. Yeah, so death is not the worst.
I put John Stark in a small forward for the next.
Losing your freedom. Huh? Who?
I put John Stark in a small forward for the next.
Wrong one. Yeah, look, John Stark up, yes. Oh, boy. So anyways. Anything else?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.